So yesterday we started talking about the Roman Empire. Some of the things that we learned about the Roman Empire that we talked about is that the Roman Empire, Braden, it's pretty big. In fact, we talked about, Braden Nelson, that this empire, 1,000,000 square miles. And one of the things that we mentioned last time was that at first it actually wasn't an empire at all. They had some sort of representation, some sort of democracy. Braden, what kind of government did the Roman Empire have before it was an empire? It was a republic, absolutely. And in addition to it being a republic, Samantha, we talked about there was like an institution, a group where individuals served for a period of time. In fact, Samantha, this institution was like the voice of the people. We actually have one of these too in our country. What institution did they have that made the laws in their government? It was the Senate, right? We talked about a Senate. That's a term on the board, and they had all of the power, but it didn't stay that way. In fact, you might recall Dallas, that there was an individual, charismatic, a good general, a good leader. In fact, so good, he decided to like push the bounds of what was acceptable, and he actually even took over the government. Dallas, who was this person? Julius Caesar. Now, things were like okay for like 30 seconds under Julius Caesar. He crossed the Rubicon. He wasn't supposed to. He took over. But then as a result of him doing this, Brooklyn, what happened to Julius Caesar? He was stabbed, right? Like he was assassinated 23 times, not assassinated 23 times, but stabbed 23 times. 60 men participated, and that's the end of Julius Caesar. And you think everything would be fine, everything would be okay. But Gibson, there was a problem. The problem was that Julius Caesar left a will, and in the will, there was someone who's going to take over the government, this massive empire. And who's he giving the power to? There's a problem with his age. He's 18. So this actually causes a civil war. There's two people. There's two sides. Octavian Augustus is only a teenager when he is tapped to become the next guy, selected in this will to be the next guy. And that's a problem because there's someone who doesn't agree with that at all. There's a guy named Mark Antony, and Mark Antony was a general who had worked with Julius Caesar. He knew Julius Caesar, and now they're fighting for power. And Mark Antony, he's not going to work alone. In fact, you might remember Noah. There's a woman he hooks up with, not just romantically, but politically as well. Super famous woman. In fact, probably the most famous ruler of Egypt. People dress up like her for Halloween costumes. Who is this woman? Cleopatra, right? And even though he hooks up militarily with her, he hooks up romantically with her, this doesn't work out. In the year 31 BCE, he, Mark Antony, and Cleopatra lose this civil war against Octavian Augustus. By the way, side note, Cleopatra, she's not Egyptian. What was she? She was Greek. And the reason why she's even there is because of this process we've called Hellenization, the spread of Greek culture to the spread of Greek language. So that's Cleopatra. We talked about her. We also mentioned yesterday, when we talked about these terms, we have these terms, Hellenization and Romanization. We also talked yesterday about these vocabulary words. So let's talk about these vocabulary words. We have Hellenization, we have Romanization, but we also have these other words on the board, syncretism. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that? Let's go to Juan. Juan, syncretism, we have, this is like the blending of beliefs. What way did those Romans blend beliefs of people and things that had come before? Okay, so maybe some assistance. That's okay, because Becca is going to come and she's going to assist. There was something, I think we talked about this yesterday. Well, let's look at the board. You see on the board where it says Jupiter equals Zeus on the board? What does that even mean? Who's Zeus for the Greeks? Like the main god. And so why am I putting Jupiter equals Zeus? And anyone can jump into this. What does that mean, Salem?
They took over Greece and in gods, they just kind of changed their names a bit.
Yeah, so when we look at Romanization and Hellenization, so that's like the spread of Greek culture, spread of Roman culture. The Greeks, the Romans super duper loved everything Greek. So you know what they did? They just copied all the Greek gods and they just changed their names. And I bet you could probably do this with me. So for example, do this with me. In Greek mythology, there's a god of war. Who's the god of war in Greek mythology? Ares, right? And they changed the name Ares and they make his name into, what is the Roman god of war? It's also a planet. Mars, okay. There's a Greek goddess of love. Her name was Aphrodite. She got another name by the Romans and also a planet. Her name became Venus. There is a god of the sea for the Greeks. His name was Poseidon. They changed his name to another planet. The Roman name was Neptune. There was a god of the underworld. The Greeks called him Hades, but the Romans called him another planet, or actually it used to be a planet. Pluto, poor Pluto got voted out being a planet. So they're the exact same things. This is an example of this word, syncretism. They're taking something that was before and they're blending it and they're bringing it to theirs. But there's the second word, which is Romanization, which is the spread of Roman culture, Latin, the Roman culture, including Latin. Who here is in French class? Who here is in French? No one's in French? Of all of you, no one's in, so you're who's in Spanish? Okay, great. So super easy. I bet you actually know this. I'm going to ask you a French question if that's okay. How do you say yes in French? Oui. How do you say yes in Spanish? Are those similar in the same ballpark? Yeah. In fact, if you listen to French, there's a lot of similarity between French and English, right? I'm sorry, French and Spanish, right? Because they're related. When we look at Romanization, the spread of Roman culture and language, guess where Spanish originally came from? Take a wild guess. Latin. Guess where French came from? And Italian and Portuguese. Latin, right? So one of the things is, and in fact, what do we call the alphabet you're using right now? Okay. Okay, so Salem, what is it? So we call our alphabet the Latin. We're using the Latin alphabet. And it's not just English that uses it, because when you take Spanish, did you have to like learn a brand new alphabet with different characters and different symbols? If you take French, you have to learn radically new characters, different symbols. And spoiler, if you take German or Dutch or Belgian or Portuguese, you have to learn different characters. No, we're still using the same alphabet as the Romans did 2,000 years ago. That's an example of Romanization. It's the spread of their language, their culture. Go ahead.
Aren't like Spanish and French called languages because
Yeah, so when we think about like romance, we think about like love. And people say, oh, like French is like a romance language. And it is a romance language, but it's not called romance language because people like love each other when you use French. They're called romance languages because guess what language, guess what place in the world it came from? Rome, right? So that's even a way that the Roman Empire, dead for 2,000 years, still influences us to this day. So this is our new material that we're now transitioning. And on the handout, it says on the handout, I want you to write one single word. Do you see where it says the Roman Empire spread? They used their technology and engineers to build infrastructure. I just need that one word, infrastructure. If you don't know how to spell the word, it's on the slide. It's also one line below. So make sure you write infrastructure. So what is the definition for that word? If we're saying that they used their engineers and their technology built infrastructure, what is like a general description? If I say, I don't even know what that word means, how would you describe that word? Maybe some of you don't know. What does that word infrastructure mean? Yeah, so it typically means things that are physical and not just like physical things, but things that benefit the whole community. For example, there's two things on the line below where it says this infrastructure included, I want you to write down this word first of all, which is aqueduct. If you look at that word aqueduct, there's two different words that we could probably break that up into. And if you didn't even know what that means, you could infer and guess what it means. What's one word of that word that you could split up, you could guess what that means? What does that probably mean? Water, right? Like we have a word like aquatics, or in Spanish, how do you say water? So you see there's a relation there. What about the second part of that word? What is a duct? If you are a homeowner, you're like, oh, I got to replace my ductwork this summer before it gets hot, we got to replace the ductwork. Yeah, like the physical things that are moving the air from room to room, those are like your air ducts, right? So if I'm telling you that this picture on the screen is an aqueduct, even though it kind of just looks like a bridge, there's actually something being moved on a channel on the very top. What do you think is being moved on that thing? Water. And so they're moving water from like the mountainside, high elevation, and you can't tell, but there's like a slight degree difference. And if there's a slight degree difference and one side is higher than the other, what is gravity doing to the water? It's going to bring it down. And so the cool thing, the Romans, they built these aqueducts, basically these water pipes to move water hundreds of miles from higher elevations where there was rain and it got collected, and they brought it down to the cities. This aqueduct that is standing here, I mean, there's, just to give you a sense, these are people standing right there. Like there's people in this photograph, like looking down over the river. This is a big thing. This thing's 2,000 years old. Do you think the Little Caesars on Spencer Highway is going to be around in 2,000 years? No. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, do you think the LaPorte Museum out there, you know, like when you go to Sylvan Beach and there's like that little train and there's like the little station, do you think that building's going to be around in 2,000 years ago? 2,000 years from now? I don't think so, right? But the Romans built things like this. They're still here 2,000 years later. They built aqueducts. But they also built other things, and where it says infrastructure included, we have aqueduct, and I want you to write one more thing. I want you to write down the word roads. Now, roads, let me show you a picture. So write down on your handout, roads. We have infrastructure included, two things, aqueduct and roads. I'm gonna show you a picture of a Roman road. If you look at this picture, they paved these roads, they paved roads, and this road is 2,000 years old. Same thing, let's pretend that Fairmont, that no one is around anymore to like fix Fairmont, and it continues to rain and hurricane and storm and trucks still drive on it. How will Fairmont look in 2,000 years without a government actively taking care of that? Probably not so great. Listen, this road is 2,000 years old. I mean, it's not like a perfect road, but I mean, for a 2,000-year-old road built before modern technology, that's pretty impressive. In fact, if you look at this map, these are all the places that Romans built roads. Every orange, I don't know, whatever color you want to call that, those are Roman roads. And that's really great because if I don't have a road made of concrete, if I don't have a road that is paved, my road's made out of dirt. What happens to a dirt road in, I don't know, the rainy season? It becomes mud. And I don't know if you go mudding or anything like that can be fun. You get in a truck, do all that. But even like with the best truck and the best driver, what can happen to you from time to time? You get stuck and you get pulled out by someone else with a car engine or whatever, but there's no trucks and no gas and no cars. You get stuck, it's like your wagon got stuck. Is it going to be easy all the time to trade, easy all the time to travel if that's the conditions? So when the Romans come, they beat you up and they conquer you and they're like, well, that's kind of like a bummer. Like I lost my freedom, I lost my independence. But the Romans, everywhere they go, they start building stuff. And like, it's stuff that like benefits me. Like you may not think, oh, a road, that's like a big deal. But listen, that's a big deal. Like, that's awesome. Like, I'm kind of happy the Romans did that. Also, I like water. I mean, I need to drink. Like, the Romans conquered me. They took my freedom, but they've given me all this stuff. That's why on the next line, it says on the handout that these construction projects won the loyalty, you'll write down, of the locals. It won the loyalty of the locals. Here's the problem. Okay. 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 Yes, I think hopefully if she's calling herself, she should be able to pick up the phone. Yeah, so I'll just keep on, yeah, keep and she'll be able to come. Okay, and if not, let me know. Thank you so much. Okay, so there's benefits, right? It says on the handout that being part of the Roman Empire brought practical projects that they could have never have, you'll write down, built on their own. They could have never built these things on your own. There's a lot of things like you and your uncles or you and your cousins can do. If there's a hurricane and your fence blows down, can you and your dad and your uncles put up a fence again? Yeah, but can you and your uncles put up, I don't know, 100-mile aqueduct? You know, you don't know my uncle. You know, no, probably not. So there's some benefits of being part of the Roman Empire. And because these things like make my life better, it says that these projects reduce the chance of, you'll write down the word rebellion. Because maybe I don't want to rebel anymore. Maybe I don't want to leave the Roman Empire, because if I leave the Roman Empire, there's no more fresh water being brought in. There's no more good roads being brought in. There's no more bridges. There's no more schools. There's no more hospitals. There's no more temples. There's no more stadiums. No more libraries. Maybe it's like probably better to stay in the Roman Empire. Below that, it says well-maintained roads. We're going to write down well-maintained Roman roads helped increase. You're going to write down two things. We've already talked about them. They increased trade and travel. Because you know what? If there's a good road, I have no problem. Did you not get a handout last time? You know what you should do if you don't have something? Guess what you should do? You should ask, right? If you don't ask, if you don't take some initiative, you're going to get left behind. Okay, so you be an advocate for your education. You raise your hand, you ask. We're on the bottom line where it says well-maintained roads helped increase, write down trade and travel. So that's good, right? I can do business. I'm not literally being stuck in the mud. This is a really good thing. But even though there's a lot of good things on the backside, there's problems. Because no matter how good you do, no matter how well you are off, there's people who are not going to like you, people who are threatened by you. And actually, guess what? There's a country that doesn't like the Roman Empire, and they're going to be constantly fighting, constantly at war. We need to go back a little bit, and you're going to help me in this. Remember the Greeks? We talked about the Greeks ever so briefly on Tuesday. The Greeks had a country that was their rivals. In fact, this country invaded them twice. Who invaded Greece twice? Persia. And in fact, because the Persians invaded Greece twice, one of these people from the Greek world invaded them back and conquered them. Who was that? Alexander the Great. But what happened to Alexander the Great's empire when he died? It broke up. And guess what? Persia got their freedom back when Alexander the Great died. So guess what? Persia's back. And guess what? Persia thinks about the Roman Empire. They don't like them. On the top of the back side, it says Rome was in conflict on its eastern border with, you'll write down Persia. On the map on the screen, Persia's in purple, Rome is orange or coral. I've heard people call that different colors, whatever you want to call that. That's the Roman Empire. This is definitely not green. So whatever color you call this, that's the Roman Empire. Persians are in purple, and they are fighting for the yellow and the green. The yellow and the green are in between. So Persia and Rome are constantly fighting each other. That's a problem. But there's another problem as well, because it says on the next line that Rome was also in conflict with its northern border. France has been conquered. There are constant battles in the north, their border with, you'll write down the term Germanic barbarians. These are people who are German, Germanic barbarians. In fact, if you look at the map on the screen, a lot of that map is orange, but Germany not conquered by the Roman Empire. Look at that word barbarian. When you hear that word, what kind of images, what do you think of? What makes a barbarian a barbarian? They're savages. What other words? They're warriors. What else? How might they look physically? How might they dress? Scruffy, right? Anything else? They're ruthless, right? This is how the Romans, on one hand, the Romans, they have cities, they have buildings, they're building aqueducts and roads. The Germans are these wild, barbaric, bearded savages that live in the forests of Germany. And they had a reputation of being really good fighters. Has Germany continued to have a reputation of being a country of really good fighters? Even if you didn't like the Nazis, which you shouldn't, the Nazis were a powerful army. The Germans were a powerful force in the 1900s, World War I and World War II, and even today. They have one of the best armies in the world. And that didn't start just recently. Going back 2,000 years ago, one of the only people the Romans, with their discipline and their army, could not conquer, they couldn't conquer the Germans. And so that's a constant challenge for them in the north. So what to do with all these challenges? It says on the handout that the Roman army kept strict discipline and order in the empire. And we need to make sure that if you're in the army, you're doing a good job. If you're in the army, we need to know that you're 100% in the army. And so it says on the handout that the penalty for cowardice or sleeping on the job, if you are the guy and it's like your turn to be on watch, what's going to possibly happen to all of us if it was your job to be on watch and you fell asleep? We're all dead. So the consequences were severe. What's the penalty for falling asleep? We're going to write down you were beat to death. Where it says the penalty for cowardice or sleeping on the job was being beat to death. That's what's happening on this picture. This guy fell asleep on the job and his friends had the responsibility of beating him to death. How many kids at LaPorte High School would be alive right now if we had this rule? We have people struggling right now to stay awake as we speak. But that's the rule. That's the kind of discipline. If you join the army, man, you know you could actually get the death penalty for snoozing. But what about if it's not just like me? What if it's not just me? What if actually our whole group kind of like sucked at what we did? Like, what if all of us as a group, we were cowards? All of us as a group, we didn't execute the strategies we were taught. What if we as a group messed up? Well, it says on the handout that if a whole unit failed in their work, they faced, and I want you to write down, it's actually a vocabulary term. There's the first two words on the next slide I want you to write down, and just write the first two words on the next slide. Write down, they faced what's called the decimation. So that's all I need you to write down where it says, if a whole unit failed, write down the decimation. Now, we use that word, like you've probably heard the word decimate or decimated. And for context, if I say, man, I watched this game and that team decimated the other team, what does that mean in context? Like destroyed or wiped out? Where do we even get that word from? Listen, we get that word from the Roman Empire. On the next line is where we're going to write down the rest of the information. Do you see where it says this is a punishment where? You're going to write down this is a punishment where 1 out of 10 of a unit was killed for cowardice. If you messed up, if you failed, if you weren't brave, we're going to line up every soldier of your group that messed up and wasn't brave, and we're going to count off 1 to 10. Every 10th guy, we're going to kill in front of you. And then we're going to count to the next guy, and we're going to kill him in front of you. And hopefully the other 9 are going to realize how important it is for you to get your head in the game, because when you don't, you're going to be disciplined with what we call the decimation. We still use that word today. They were decimated. It was decimating. And that word, you can even pick out the root because this is a Latin root word. And like during the Olympics this summer, if there was an event called the decathlon, how many events are there in the decathlon? If there is a decade, how many years in a decade? And if there's a decimation, we're going to kill 1 out of every 10. So listen, the standards are high. The standards are high. I can be beaten for messing up my individual job. We can face the decimation if we as a group mess up. What if on the next line, what if a whole community rebels? If I'm conquered by Rome, what does Rome expect me to give them throughout the year? What are things that regular people, not soldiers, regular people are expected to give me, Rome? What's that? What am I supposed to give the government? Taxes, right? What if I don't pay my taxes right? What the IRS is coming, right? What if I also, at this time, there's other things you're expected to do? They expected that you're going to worship the Roman gods. Because if I beat you, if your God was actually good, your God would have kept you from being beaten by me. But because I conquered you and I beat you up, I'm expecting not only going to give me taxes, but you're also going to worship my gods. What people group is that going to be a problem for? Because they don't do other gods. The Jews. You remember for the Jews, they say there's just one God and he's invisible. They're going to have a problem with the Romans. And if you all the way back. If you look at the map, the Jews, they've been conquered by Rome. And so the Romans tell them, I need you to worship our gods. You don't have to mean it. You just have to bow down to the statue. No big deal. You just have to like honor my gods and we'll call it a day. Every day at LaPorte High School, what do we do when we expect you to stand and honor something? The pledge. Now, maybe it was like more like we kept it more when you were younger, but you're supposed to stand for the pledge. And maybe not everyone stands, but maybe some of you do stand. And what else might you do physically other than stand? You might put something else. Hand over your heart, right? And some of you might go even further and actually recite the pledge, right? And then it's not just the United States, it's the Texas pledge. But honestly, of all the kids who stand, how many kids literally, I'm pledging to Texas right now. Like I truly mean it. Do most kids mean it if they stand? Do most kids mean it if they even if you say it, are most kids literally, I'm just pledging to the United States. I'm fighting for the Republic. No, you know why you're standing? Because you're supposed to stand. And it's just like a thing you do. And you don't think twice about it. The Romans were like, okay, they told the Jews, you don't have to mean it. All you have to do is worship the statue. You don't have to mean it. It's fine. It's okay. Just like bulldog period and you stand for, you don't mean it, just do it. Not a big deal. Based on what you know about the Jewish religion, are they going to be okay just going through the motions and just worshiping a statue? No, I don't know if you know this story, but there's this Bible story about this guy named Daniel. And in this, there's a book. He's a prophet, the prophet Daniel. I'm so sorry. Give me one sec. So I don't know if you remember this story. In the book of Daniel, if you've ever read the Bible, it says that Daniel actually had 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and a guy whose name was Abednego. And they told, hey man, we got the statue. We just want you to bow down and worship it. No big deal. And the 3 Jewish guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, say, actually, we can't do that. And they get thrown into a fiery furnace. Like they couldn't just, even though they were told, you don't have to mean it. Just like bow down, no big deal. They were thrown alive into a fiery pit. So that's a big deal. And so the Jews have this problem. It says on the handout, in the 1st century, during the childhood years of Jesus of Nazareth, because, you know, Jesus was from a town called Nazareth. You could still go to that city today. You could visit Nazareth. People have been living there since the days of Jesus. And Jews lived there. And it says the Jews rebelled against Roman authority. And that was just like really just too much. Like we can't have these Jews not going along with the whole vibe of the Roman Empire. And so they need to come up with a form of punishment, something that's public, something that's humiliating, something that will scare people so that they don't break the law as well. And this is a punishment like when you think about like the West, like cowboys and Indians, what type of punishment did they like do to people? Hanging, right? Like you can like imagine that, right? Like that's like a punishment of the American West. What was a punishment, a death penalty that the Romans perfected and made famous? Okay, I heard like 4 different things, but I want to answer your question in a second. But so crucifixion, right? There's a word crucifixion. And what I want you to write down as I go all the way back is where it says local Jews rebelled against Roman authority, and we'll write down 2,000 faced crucifixion. I want you to write down where it says against Roman authority and 2,000 faced crucifixion. The word crucifixion is there for you if you don't know how to. So just write 2,000 faced crucifixion. That's what we're writing where it says against Roman authority and 2,000. I'm so sorry, I may have skipped one. Communities who rebelled face punishment. I apologize if I skipped that. Communities who rebelled face punishment. My example is that the Jews in this real incident who rebelled against Roman authority, 2,000 faced crucifixion. Here, you can see it's done along a road, and that's what the Romans crucify people in public. They wanted to make an example, and typically, you didn't crucify people that were, like if you were a wealthy person, you would never be crucified. If you were a respected person, and you got in some trouble and killed someone, you would never be crucified. You only crucify the worst of the worst of the worst. Like if I'm walking down the road and like me and my son and we see these bodies and my son's like, what did they do? I could say with confidence, son, I don't know what they did, but I can tell you, I know for a fact they're scum. Like I don't know the details of that person's life, but they've got to be like basically trash because we only crucify trash, son. And that's what they did. You know, crucifixion is a very painful process. We know how the Romans crucified people. You know, they would start off before you ever got the cross. The Romans had like instruction manuals of how to crucify people, and we can read how they did it. And step one is like they whip you, and it was super common. They whipped you so much that your ribs would be exposed, like they could see your bones. And the Romans also said from time to time, sometimes your intestines show as well. Like sometimes your intestines started to come out. Go ahead.
Didn't they like show it in the Passion of Christ, that movie?
Yeah, there's a movie called The Passion of Christ that kind of shows those types of things. So it's pretty terrible. And then you get put on a cross, and you know you die on the cross, the Roman cross, actually from suffocating, because you get put on the cross in this really awkward position. And your back has been bloody, your back's been torn up, and then they put these nails on your wrist and your nails in your ankle, and you're in this awkward position. And you know what you have to do to breathe? You don't consciously breathe like on purpose. You're not like, oh, okay, remember, you know, even when you're asleep, you know, if you like walked in and like your dad was unconscious, you're like, is he alive? Oh, his chest is moving, he's breathing, right? Because you automatically inhale, exhale. And the thing about being on the cross is you're in this awkward position to exhale. You actually have to push up and lift yourself up on the cross, which means your ankles, which have a nail on it, and your wrists, which have a nail, you are like ripping yourself every time. And it's not like you can stop, because you can't, like right now, it's like stop breathing. You can't stop breathing. Like your body wants to get rid of the carbon dioxide. And so the great thing about crucifixion is, you know, when I'm beating someone up, I get tired. You know, like I can only hit a person so many times. But the great thing about you being on a cross, you know who's torturing you on the cross? Yourself. In fact, I could leave you on a cross like, oh, it's 11 o'clock at night, you haven't died yet, I'll come back in the morning. Guess what you've done to yourself all night from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m.? You're torturing yourself on that cross. Every time you exhale, you're hurting yourself. Because it was pretty brutal crucifixion, the Romans actually, when they looked at crucified people, they actually said, what we're seeing is so terrible, we don't have a word to describe how bad it is. And there's a word that we use to this day, that this word actually means, I feel like I'm being crucified. And if you look at the word crucifixion, think about words that you have for being in a lot of pain. What's a word that has this root, C-R-U-C? And it's a word, if you say it like, how bad's the pain? Oh, it is, and this word has that root word in it. What word do we use for extreme pain in English? No. Say that word. There's a word we use all the time. Sometimes you say, man, I'm in excruciating pain. We get that word, our word, excruciating, C-R-U-C. How do you spell, what does it mean in Spanish if you put C-R-U-Z? What does that mean? What does cruz mean? Cross, right? That's what you're, if you say, I'm in excruciating pain, you're saying, I feel like I'm being crucified right now. And the Romans invented this word. It says on the handout, which means the pain of being, you'll write down, crucified. Here is a picture of what the Romans knew about your body. They knew that there was an artery. They knew that there was nerves. And if you hit the median nerve with that nail, it's going to send constant pain your body the whole time. And the great thing about being crucified is the Romans recorded people stayed on that cross for 2 days. Every breath, they're torturing themselves. And the Romans said, yep. And then finally, your body gets so tired of the pain, you can't lift yourself up anymore, and you suffocate to death on the cross. So it's a perfect form of torture. Now listen, if this is the government we're dealing with, the government's crucifying people who do wrong. The government is beating to death people who fall asleep on the job. The government is giving the decimation to soldiers who are cowards. I'm thinking that the army is going to be pretty good. I'm thinking the army is going to be pretty intense because they don't want to face punishment. And so it says on the handout, there's this term Pax Romana. If you got rid of the X in Pax and put P-A-Z, what does that mean in Spanish? What does paz in Spanish. It means peace. This term Pax Romana, I want you to write down, literally means Roman peace. Write down Roman peace. Roman peace. Because the government was so intense, people were kind of afraid to break the law. Like, do you want to be a criminal in the Roman Empire? Like, if you had seen people being crucified, if you knew that the army was so good, they kill people for falling asleep, I don't know if I want to like be a criminal, a robber. I don't know if I want to do that. So actually, during the Roman rule, everything in pink in this map was super safe. Not perfect. There's still crime, of course, because we're humans, but it was so safe that the nickname for this time period is called Pax Romana. It says on the handout, because of the efficiency of the Roman army and navy, there was, you'll write down, peace. There was peace. It wasn't perfect, but there was a lot of peace during the Pax Romana. In fact, people were afraid on the handout to challenge Rome and break the law. People were afraid, it says on the handout, to break the law. They were afraid to break the law. Pax Romana, it says on the handout, led to an increase. Two things you'll write down: trade and travel. I'm not afraid to travel on the road. I know my wife and my daughters are not going to get raped. I know we're not going to get robbed because there's a Roman army. They're so good they kill people who fall asleep. There's a Roman law that people will get crucified. I'm actually okay. I can go from Egypt to England and not worry for the most part. There's some good things about the Roman Empire, Pax Romana being one of them. It led to an increase in trade and travel. Last three lines. This army was actually something people wanted to join. It says serving in the army was actually a way to earn, you'll write down the word citizenship. Citizenship. In our country, in the United States, what do you have to do? Easiest way to become a citizen? Just be born. Was that like a super hard thing? Like, did you have anything to do with that? No, like your mom, boom, you're American citizen, like super easy. If my grandpa comes from Mexico and he has kids here, boom, his kids are American citizens. That's not how Rome was. They're not just giving citizenship for free. Why would I give you a privilege and you don't have to do anything for it? When you don't work for something, do you like super value it? No. The Romans said, you want to be a citizen? Go join the army. You serve for 2, 3, 4 years, and then we'll think about giving you this thing, which is a citizenship certificate. Then you can vote. Then you can have rights. Then you can have a say. Serving in the army was the way to earn citizenship. Last two lines, last 2 minutes. Romanization, it says on the handout, the spread of Roman culture. We mentioned that in the beginning of our time, was the spread of Roman culture. And on this map, all those colors represent places where they used to speak Latin, and their Latin changed. Latin in Italy became Italian. Latin in Spain, Spanish. Latin in Portugal, Portuguese. Latin in France became French. The last thing we're going to write down, the ultimate example of Romanization, we're going to write down, what do we call those languages? Romance languages. Romance languages. Okay, we finished Rome today, the Roman Empire. I'm very glad that we got that done. There's going to be something in Teams for you to take a look at this evening. Please do so. I look forward to seeing all of you tomorrow, except for those of you who might be gone for athletics. Make sure you pay attention to your team's assignments.